received an email from a listener in British Columbia. His name is Bernard. And I received this email right after the last show I did before I went on vacation. And we have been talking about how parents behave, how some Canadian parents behave at their kids' hockey games, or maybe lack of proper behavior. Name calling, obscenities, and in some cases, there's brawling going on. Well, Bernard is from South Africa, and he believes he knows exactly why Canadians or parents are behaving as they have been. And I asked him to come on this show and talk about this and take some phone calls from you if you disagree with him. Maybe people who will actually agree with Bernard on what he has to say. Bernard, good to talk to you.
Hi, Roy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Do you happen to have that, I should have asked you this, do you happen to have the email that you sent me in front of you?
I certainly do.
Would you mind reading it, please?
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Okay.
It's a little bit long, so I'll try and get through as quickly as I can. So, as I said, I listened to the conversation of your show and about parents' behavior and such, and really had quite a few of my own thoughts around this, and listened to what the guest and the listeners were saying in that regard, and what to do to curb this fighting. And really, it was a case of saying, well, you know, the way people are responding to fighting and the way people were calling in on your show, none of them were actually talking about the actual fighting in the NHL and the NHL hockey. And the fact that these are the same people who likely cheer the fights and talk about this as a game highlight after the game has finished. So what I then mentioned to you is that I moved to Canada 5 years ago, and I think this background is quite important. I'm from South Africa, and I've been an avid sports fan my whole life. I'm 46 years old now, and I really do follow international sport on a daily basis. And so I know a lot about sport. I think I know a lot about what's considered acceptable behavior in sports, what's both on and off the field, and really what is acceptable behavior by parents and supporters. So I was just surprised that nowhere in your conversation did the fact that the fighting in hockey, which is really so endemic to the hockey, which as I've experienced over the last 5 years, was not mentioned at all as one of the reasons for the way the supporters are behaving.
Let me tell you why. Because no one thought of it in those terms. I can virtually guarantee that no one, I may be proven wrong here, but I can almost guarantee that no one listening to the program who responded thought of fighting in professional hockey as having a direct relationship with the behavior or misbehavior of some parents at their kids' games. And there was another situation that was reported on earlier this week in Tweed, Ontario. There were two teams playing in a junior playoff game, not a championship game, but a playoff game. And I guess the parents got on each other before the game. They stayed on each other during the game, and then it turned into a nasty brawl. But I don't mean to say that we're really shallow people in Canada, but I don't think it occurred to anybody that maybe the fighting in the National Hockey League or professional hockey has anything to do with parents' behavior in the stands when their kids are playing.
Well, from my observations over the last 5 years, and as I say, I came into Canada fully wishing to embrace the sport, as I have. I mean, obviously in South Africa we don't watch too much ice hockey. It's just not one of the sports. So it's fully, curling, all those sports. I was fully coming here to embrace them all. And then I start watching sports highlights, and the highlight is a fight. And I'm thinking, this is coming into my kitchen. I'm not inviting this fight into my kitchen. And then I go into a family restaurant, and I'm watching on the TV screens, and what am I seeing? I'm seeing fighting. And I'm thinking, well, this restaurant's not showing MMA, it's not showing UFC, because obviously everyone would scream objection to that. But there's really a culture of violence around hockey that, as I've witnessed and experienced over the last 5 years, that I find quite incredible. As I say, I do follow many sports around the world, and I just simply don't see it anywhere. And then coupled with that, I also see quite a disproportionate focus on hockey. I'm hearing kids who are on the ice rink at 5 o'clock in the morning when they're 3 and 4 years old, all chasing the NHL dream, and yet 1 in 100,000, or I don't know what the statistics are ever going to make the NHL. So, you put this recipe together of that culture of violence with this disproportionate focus on one sport, when there's 50 million sports out there. Let's be honest, there's so many sports around the world that I'm not surprised people overreact when the slightest things happen. So if they're watching their kid play and somebody slights their kid, and they feel they've got to, this could be the opportunity that their kid might now lose out on an NHL career because of what that kid did. And therefore the parents overreact. I think they sacrifice an enormous amount in time, in money, in everything, in their lives, in the pursuit of this dream that 1 in 100,000, I don't know what the exact statistic is, that will ever even make the NHL.
It's probably longer than 1 in 100,000. Now, there are so many international players in the NHL. Let me just read a few lines from your email. Fighting in sport belongs in the barbarian age, and when I see it being used as a means to also grow attendance at arenas as it does, it makes me shake my head in astonishment, especially when we call ourselves a civilized society. If people want to watch fighting, they can go and watch controlled form in boxing, UFC, or the like. When I challenge many a hockey fan and player as to how barbaric this behavior is, the negative role modeling it is for our children and the country as a whole, I'm told it's part of the game and makes the game what it is. What absolute blind ignorance. These same people also tell me fighting is not allowed in international hockey, in which case, why was the Olympic hockey so fantastically successful, which I did watch and cheer and die with anxiety, as did every other Canadian in the gold medal match. So, what I'd like to suggest here, and I suggested this to you in our email exchange, is that we open the phone lines, and you're okay with that, right?
Absolutely.
So you've heard what Bernard has to say. He's a 5-year resident of Canada, came here from South Africa. There's so many sports out there, but we do in Canada. We hang on hockey, don't we? Because we're the best. And when we don't win a world championship, or we don't win what used to be the Canada Cup, we don't win international competitions. It's a real problem for us. So we live and die by our hockey. But Bernard's point is, and I'm not misquoting him, and he's still on the line, he can tell me if I am, the fighting, or at least a significant part of the misbehavior, the name-calling, the aggression, and the physical violence during kids' games by the parents of those kids is directly related to the acknowledgement and the approval of and the support for fighting in professional hockey in the National Hockey League. Am I correct, Bernard? Are you saying that?
Yeah, I think just the culture of violence that is around hockey.
Okay, 1-877-399-9898. 1-877-399-9898. Is Bernard correct when he says the cultural violence that surrounds hockey is responsible for the kinds of behavior that we see among parents at their kids' games? And you know that in New Brunswick, before the next hockey season starts, any parent who wishes to attend the children's games is going to have to take an online course on behavior. You may agree with Bernard, you may disagree. Tell you what, I'll ask my call screener to not ask our callers any questions. Don't ask them how they feel about it. Let's just get their names and their locations, and we'll take the calls as they come. We'll come right back.
Radio at its weekend best. The Roy Green Show delivers on the Course Radio Network.
So we'll fly a little dangerously here. I've asked Catherine and Linda, who are normally screening the calls for this show, to not do that as we speak with Bernard, who's been in this country for 5 years from South Africa, about why there is parental misbehavior and violence at kids' hockey games. And again, Bernard says it's the cultural reality of the violence that surrounds hockey, and particularly fighting at the professional level. And Bernard, I've been thinking about what you said, and I'm going to get into trouble with my friend Don Cherry here, and he is a good friend of mine. I can see a link. I can see a link, Bernard.
Well, I think it is important that the second element of the recipe is the disproportionate focus on the NHL dream. I think that's an important element when you mix it together. that people react irrationally.
Yeah. No, we've often said that parents sometimes live vicariously through the actions of their kids on the ice, and they have unrealistic dreams and expectations for them, regardless of what it is, what sport they're playing. Let them play the game, and if they have the skill sets, it'll become evident soon enough. Rima is in Edmonton. Rima, go ahead and talk to Bernard.
Hello, Bernard.
Hi, Rima.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
It's good to see someone come out and actually express their views on the hockey game the way that you did. I have actually my 5-year-old son who's been playing hockey since he was 3. And I am one of those parents who has that dream to have my son, reach the NHL level and play and pursue his dreams, which at this point they are because I've instilled that in him. So when I listen to someone like you speak like that, I actually question myself whether I'm doing the right thing or not. And putting my kid in such a sport, which is actually, it's driven by a big part by this violence that occurs in the game. And my son sits down and watches hockey games with me a lot with him and his father. And we're huge Edmonton Oilers fans. And a lot of the time there is a lot of fighting. And we don't get him to actually turn around and be like, don't look.
So what are you going to do, Rima? What influence do you think this call, this time on the air with Bernard, is going to have on you? Will it have? Do you think it'll have any lasting influence?
Well, for me myself, it's actually gotten me to question whether I'm doing the right thing and having my son in this sport, or whether I should maybe take a step and maybe address it with the people who are maybe above me.
Okay, well, the decision as a parent is going to be yours, what sports your child plays. But if he loves hockey, let him play hockey. But really, it should be his dream, not yours.
Definitely.
Right?
Well,
because the kids want to, Bernard, kids want to please their parents.
Absolutely, and I'm not saying people mustn't play hockey. I just, after that incident that you emailed me about, the story in Tweed, Ontario, where the brawl happened. By the way, I just quickly went onto the internet now, and I see it's now had 350,000 hits in 1 week on YouTube. That's 1% of the population has gone to look at this fight. I mean, that alone says quite a bit. But, they interviewed a little kid after that, because I actually saw it on the news on Sunday night. The little kid who had been on the ice was looking with absolute bewilderment at the TV cameraman, the interviewer, saying, well, I just came here to play hockey.
That's the point, isn't it? That is the point. Rima, thank you very much for the call. There was a poem written by a 12-year-old. I'm going to have to find it. I read it a number of years ago. And it was all about the 12-year-old talking to his parents and to other adults about what it was all about for him, and it was all about the game. If anybody's got it, send it to me at roygreenshow.com, roy@roygreenshow.com. Ken is in Winnipeg. Ken, go ahead and talk to Bernard. Does he have a point?
He sure does. You know what? I like to watch hockey, but I don't watch it that much anymore. When I see the fighting, it's just a bunch of barbarians on the ice. And I hear Don Cherry say it's part of the game. I mean, I like Don Cherry, but give me a break.
But do you think the fighting at the professional level, this is what Bernard's point is, he calls it the culture of violence in the game. Do you think it has a lot to do with the behavior of the parents of their kids' games?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I love boxing. I watch boxing all the time, but that's why they call it the sweet science, because it's professional and these guys know what they're doing. To watch, what other sport relegates the acceptance of fighting in the game, and they get a 5-minute penalty or whatever? I like international hockey. There's no fighting. If you fight in the Olympics, you're gone.
Okay, Ken, I appreciate it. Now, Bernard, there are fights in other sports as well. Bench clearing brawls in baseball. We have football fights going on, but they're not sanctioned.
Absolutely, and I think, I mentioned in my email as well that everyone mentioned to me the violence and fighting in rugby. Well, there definitely is. Certainly, it's a tough, hard game. But if you fight in rugby, your consequences are so severe in terms of being sent off, so you're letting your team down firstly right there. You're probably going to be suspended for a couple of games, and there simply is no place for it. So it's tough, it's hard, it hasn't detracted from the game at all. In fact, the game is so much more free-flowing and exciting now because you don't have these random sideshows. And a critical thing on the rugby, and this is what I mentioned in my email too, is that they don't cover the fight. If there does happen to be a fight that breaks up in the game, and I can tell you now in all the rugby I've watched, I've probably seen 3 fights in 50 games, the cameras will not show the fight. They will pay into the audience. The commentators will not comment on it. It will never be mentioned except for the fact that that player has been cited, suspended, or whatever else it might be.
Okay, let me get Mike on in White Rock, British Columbia. Mike, go ahead, please.
I agree with Bernard, and I think it goes even deeper than that. Maybe we need this. Maybe this is part of a safety event or something because of the perception of a lack of justice in our system. Every week we hear of the injustice you rightly bring to us. We get angry or upset and emotional and have no outlet for that. And yet you go and indulge this in a sport where police are in attendance, and if that was on the street, those kids or fighters would be arrested, and the people in the audience should be arrested. There's something deeper here that we really need to address, and that there is no sense of justice in our civilization. So maybe the sport with the referee is why people get angry and so upset.
So tell me why parents don't control themselves in front of their kids. What's your theory on that, Mike? Mike?
That's a tough one on making a generalization.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I would think that
I'm just curious. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Rage and injustice. The rules weren't followed. And
well, I'm going to tell you what I think really quickly because we have only limited time. I think Bernard's right. A lot of it has to do with the NHL dream.
I think it's more than that. It may be the NHL dream, but you don't go and fight because you might have an odd. There's something happening there. How could you have that much emotion and go and fight someone over an NHL dream?
Yeah, well, I know. I hate to see parents going at it at kids' games, and I've seen it, but not in hockey. I've seen it in other sports where the at least it's gotten really nasty verbally. Blaine in Calgary, we have about a minute, Blaine, so we have little time. Go ahead and do you agree with Bernard?
Well, I'm going to have to say no, I don't agree, only because I used the word responsible. I don't believe fighting in hockey is responsible for grown adults to have bad behavior in a hockey arena in some little town in Ontario or Manitoba. These are adults. They have mortgages on their homes. They're raising their children, and they're acting like absolute imbeciles. And to say hockey fighting is the reason why they're doing that, we're just giving them an excuse.
Bernard, I have 10 seconds. Bernard, I have 10 seconds for a quick reply to what Blaine has said.
It's the cultural violence that the fighting creates. It's not the fighting per se that gets people behaving like this. It's the cultural violence that violence is acceptable around the game that gets people to respond disproportionately to what's going on.
All right. I want you to come back. Would you do that?
Absolutely.
Because we need to talk about this some more. The reaction has been incredible. So and the majority of people have agreed with you. So we'll invite you back. Bernard, thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Roy.